I would like to ask you guys to close your eyes for a little bit and keep them closed for me, please. Now, what do you see? Darkness? Emptiness? Nothing? Well, please open your eyes again and let me tell you about my experience seeing what could be considered absolute darkness. Because as a matter of fact, human eyelids can never block light completely. So what you just saw, even if you try to close your eyes real tight, is not absolute darkness. And my experience with absolute darkness happened at this beautiful place. Some of you could probably recognize this place, as it is taken at a famous spot in a famous World Heritage Site, Son Doong Cave, the world's largest underground kingdom. And I'm sure if you look it up online, you see many more stunning photos of many more stunning places in this cave. But none of those was my favorite when I visited the cave 4 years ago. My favorite was a place that deep inside Son Doong, so deep that no light could ever get in. And I remember when we got there, Dr. Howard Limbert, the scientist that discovered Son Doong, asked all of us to turn off our headlamps. And my immediate reaction was, I felt suffocated. I couldn't breathe. I was overwhelmed with the darkness. Putting my hands in front of me, I couldn't see them. Looking down to my feet, I couldn't see where I was standing on. And I thought to myself, this is probably what I would feel like when I die, when my soul is still there, but my body's gone. And it was my most unforgettable moment because it helped me to realize that human beings are just so insignificant compared to nature, that we like to think to ourselves, oh, we are so mighty, we conquer nature. Reality is, nature's darkness can swallow us any second, and human beings just become so vulnerable. My second most unforgettable moment came the very next day when Dr. Howard Limbert called me out to talk while the entire expedition team was taking a break after a long day trekking. With teary eyes, he told me that he regretted discovering Son Doong. Son Doong was fine on its own. But now that it's open to public, people want to exploit it for money. And as much as he liked to keep the place safe by only bringing in the most respectful people, trekking in small groups, and capped it at a few hundreds a year, there's another construction conglomerate that was trying to build a cable car, which is going to bring in 1,000 people per hour. Going from a few hundreds a year to 1,000 an hour, that would kill Son Doong. And even though Limbert was the scientist that discovered this place, as a foreigner, he kept on emphasizing with me that sustainable changes must come from within, which means in order to influence Vietnamese government's decision, it must take Vietnamese people. Being the only Vietnamese in the exhibition team that day, I felt extremely guilty. Sitting in front of a crying man who was about the same age with my dad, I felt extremely guilty, and that sense of guilt was what motivated me and my teammates to start SaveSonDoong. That was in the year of 2014. And we faced lots of difficulty with a core team members of less than 10 members. We paid everything from our own savings, yet we faced suspicion from naysayers who questioned us. Where does your funding come from? Who was behind you? We were even labeled conservative, anti-development, or even reactionary. Now, none of those allegations were true. All we were advocating for was 1, sustainable development, and 2, transparency. And I'm going to get to 2 shortly. But now on 1, sustainable development. What does that term even mean in a context of Vietnam, a country that is so obsessed with economic growth? Now, the idea of a cable car to a natural site is not too unusual around the world, but what set Vietnam apart was the lack of public voices in the planning and constructing of these projects. A 2015 report by PACT, an international environmental organization, pointed to a raft of loopholes in the law of environmental assessment of Vietnam. It says that there is no requirement for open public involvement, and agencies that are supposed to represent the communities usually do not reflect their opinions and concerns accurately. Now that is on the side of the government, but what about the people? What saddened us more was when we faced supporters who agree with our cause but refuse to take actions. They asked, what's the point? What's the point of starting a campaign, of circulating a petition, of collecting signatures, of raising awareness among the people, while at the end of the day, the decision comes from the government? Well, that line of thought saddened us because it did not just give up on Son Doong, it gave up on their right to participate in the decision-making process of anything relating to their national assets. In other words, it gave up on the fate of their own country. But that same line of thought was what kept us ongoing, because we have to make sure that Son Doong is going to be successful. Then it can serve as a precedent, as a case study for other citizen-led environmental campaigns. And the most effective way for Son Doong to be served is that people, like all of us, need to boycott any environmentally damaging projects to this place. The cable car, at the end of the day, is a for-profit project. And if investors cannot see its profitability, they will not invest. But where does profit come from? Our own pockets, ladies and gents. So our primary approach for the past 4 years was trying to make information regarding the cave as available to public as possible. For example, the virtual reality exhibition that we have in the front was one of those initiatives. Now, some people expressed their concern. They were saying that, well, the virtual reality would draw more attention to this place and make people want to go visit it more, fitting into the whole mass tourism dilemma. We believed in the opposite. We believe that if people are informed, they can make the best decisions for themselves. And therefore, we try to make information transparent. That's why our virtual reality does not just contain the beauty of Son Doong, but also its scientific values and why they need to be preserved. That is also why I said that the ultimate goal of SaveSonDoong is not just about saving a cave, even though it's the world's largest cave, but it's also about advocating for transparency. Before SaveSonDoong, there were other environmental campaigns that were pushing for transparency. For example, in 2010, the protests against bauxite factories and in the highland region of Vietnam. In an interview, Ms. Nguyễn Thị Kim, a 59-year-old local resident, said that fish died, plants died. Some days the sky is covered in a thick layer of white dust. As sad as it sounds, the campaign couldn't reach the masses because at that time there was no social media in Vietnam, and therefore it did not succeed. But after SaveSonDoong, there was another prominent environmental campaign, and things started to change. It was the Tree Movement in 2015, in which Hanoians started to protest against the plan of the city to remove 6,700 trees on the streets of Hanoi. These two pictures show the difference between a street before and after trees were cut. Initiated and run by multiple stakeholders, this campaign managed to bring on the street thousands of people. They prayed to the trees that were cut. They chained themselves to the ones that were left. And after weeks, they managed to bring the city chairman to have an open dialogue and an overall review on the upland tree planting of the city. This meeting involves multiple departments, scientists, and community residents, and it ended up in the cancellation of the 6,700 tree removal plan. Thank you. Now, 1 year after that, another environmental campaign that received widespread public outcry was the 2016 marine life disaster, the worst water pollution crisis in the modern history of Vietnam. thousands of kilometers of beaches were covered with fish carcasses, and the main culprit, Formosa, a Taiwanese steel plant, denied responsibility for months. More frustratingly, the government of Vietnam refused to take further action to investigate Formosa and release any information to the public. This led to a series of demonstrations throughout the country every Sunday. But this time, the authority took a much stronger stand. By the second weekend, main streets were covered with buses. Peaceful protesters were thrown onto these buses, taken to police station, and interrogated overnight, even for days. What's heart-wrenching about this is that those exact buses were the ones that usually carry students from the city center to the university village. The ones that usually bring young scholars to knowledge, to intellectual curiosity, to critical thinking, are now the ones that are bringing them to jail. Still, the protest went on for weeks, and finally, Formosa was pressed charged with a penalty of $500 million. Now, even though it is still unclear until today whether that money gets to the hand of the fishermen communities, the one that got affected the most by this disaster, this can still be considered a huge achievement for the people of Vietnam. Now, as you can see, in a country where the government becoming more increasingly wary of public sentiment online, there are also more and more successful environmental campaigns that are led by citizens. This is the best proof that the fate of your country is indeed in your hands. But in order for it to be in your hand, the first step that you need to take is to open your eyes. When TEDx organizer invited me to the stage, they asked me to conclude my talk with a call to action. Well, all that I'm asking you today is to be engaged. Simple as that. I'm not asking you to become activists. I'm not asking you to flood the street with protesting signs. I'm not asking you to chain yourself to trees or use your bodies to shield caves. No, all I'm asking you is to go out there, tune in, seek information, be engaged. Did you know that Vietnam finally enacted its law on access information? So starting in this July, you as Vietnamese citizens are finally legalized to seek information in your own country. Now, it doesn't have to be about big issues or anything like that. It can start from things really small. For example, if you know that Vietnam is one of the top 5 ocean polluters with non-biodegradable trash, you probably will start saying no to straws, to plastic bags, to styrofoam boxes. If you know that Vietnam is one of the top 2 consumers of wildlife products, you probably will start telling your parents that, well, rhino horns and elephant tusks cannot kill disease magically, but instead, they cost lives, animal lives and human lives. If you know that langur is one of the most threatened primate species, and then there are only a few of them left, only in Vietnam, you would probably start boycotting any mass tourism projects that invade the natural habitats in Sơn Trà and Cát Bà. My friends, remember the exercise that I asked you to do at first to cover your eyes? When I was trapped in darkness, I felt like I was dead. And it's not that much different from living in ignorance. Living then is not much different from dying. Some people may try to keep you in the dark because it is easier to control the blights than the open eyes. But I would put that responsibility on you. Go out, tune in, seek information, and when information not available, demand transparency. Because remember, guys, we are only intellectually plied when you choose to close our own eyes. Thank you.